We're looking good. Thanks everyone for coming either again or for the first day, whichever you were able to do. We're grateful for all of it. If you missed yesterday, I do have the recording ready to go, so I'll send it out today. And today is being recorded as well. When we break into our breakout rooms, it won't be recorded. So we crop out that empty space, and then the YouTube video will just be all the main room stuff. So if you have any issues with Zoom or anything we're doing at all today, just message me or Jeff. You should see that we're hosts in the participant list, and we'll be using Miro today, but we'll get into that in a bit. And hopefully you were able to check that out yesterday. If not, no worries, we'll figure it out. Use the chat as you wish, to each other or to us. And the raise your hand button is under reactions, if you want to use that. Keep yourself muted otherwise, unless you want to ask something.
Yes, it is also.
And I'm going to launch a little poll. Should I do that now, Ashley, or in a second?
I would go ahead now.
Right now? Okay. So I'm going to launch this, just a couple of questions so we can all see who is here. So we have a bit of an idea because we asked you this in your registration, but just so you all know, we'll get these little questions done. Give you a few minutes. I'll see here the percentage of you that have answered, and then I'll share the results with you. 30%, 36, 38, 41, pretty quick. 50, 55.
Everybody's on the ball this morning. This is great.
66, 69, yeah. 75, 80 in 40 seconds, pretty good. Now, we might be topped at 80 because we're not doing it as the facilitator people, which is fine. Okay, that's good enough. And there was a second question there too. So I think you all got that. Okay, I will stop it now. Share. So 47% service providers. And can you see the percentages or also the numbers on your end? I can see here 4 municipal staff, 2 councillors or mayors, 14 service providers, 2 provincial staff, and actually more community organizations or not-for-profits than I expected, 6. Cool, and we are primarily on the Avalon with a few in Central, a few Eastern, a few Southern. All right, thank you for that. I'll turn it to Ashley now.
Thank you, Emma. It's very exciting to see the mix of attendees. That'll really help with the collaborative approach, which is part of what we'll be discussing today. So turning to the slides here. So the agenda for today is to start to dive into identifying vulnerabilities and assigning consequence and probability to identify and determine risk associated with each of the vulnerabilities. Excuse me. So, and then we'll dive straight into the breakout rooms. So we'll get started here. So for anyone who wasn't here yesterday, so my name is Ashley Smith. I am owner and managing director of Fundamental Inc., and we're a climate action consulting firm that was engaged by Memorial University to support the delivery of the BRACE program activities. The BRACE program is building regional adaptive capacity and expertise. That's the acronym. And it's funded by Natural Resources Canada, and it's being delivered in partnership with Memorial University, the province of Newfoundland and Labrador, PEG-NL, Engineers Canada, Municipalities NL, and NLAP. So to review some key terms and concepts, some of this might be familiar, some of it may not be, but it was important for us to just sort of establish a page that everyone feels comfortable being on. So we'll just review quickly the key terms and concepts that'll be employed today. So vulnerability means your sort of exposure to the possibility of some type of harm. That's what a vulnerability is. a risk is the like jargon, the jargon that gets used once you've assigned probability of occurrence or consequence of impact to a vulnerability. Probability being a likelihood or a chance of occurrence, consequence being the seriousness or severity of that impact. And then risk tolerance, when you're talking about it specifically within the lexicon of climate change and addressing climate change vulnerabilities, has to do with the level of risk that an organization is willing to accept. And you'll see that that comes into play when we start to look at how we address vulnerabilities where the data is quite uncertain or it's a policy decision that you're being made. You have to sort of look at what the desirable outcome or what the level of service desired or that kind of thing. It's a risk tolerance decision. It's not like a design or a hard and fast like boundary decision. And so we'll get into that just a little bit. When you're doing climate vulnerability assessments, there are many, many frameworks available. Some of them are very specific. Some of them are very general. The Climate Risk Institute has one that's available. The Institute for Catastrophic Loss Reduction also has one that's available. The ISO 31000 standard is risk management in general, but you can get like a separate booklet that's a derivative of the 31000. I don't remember if it's 31,010 or 20 or 50. I don't remember exactly which one it is, but there's a climate change specific one that supports that. And that's a very general framework. The PI-VC framework, which Joe will talk about a little bit more on Wednesday, tomorrow, is like an engineering specific framework, and it has key pieces of things. It dives in really deep and is a fairly technical tool, but there's elements that are sort of appropriate at all levels. Fundamental, we have our own generalized process for when we start to go through vulnerability assessments and tying that to climate action plans. And one of the available frameworks that is highly accessible for technical and non-technical people alike is the 7 steps to assess climate change vulnerability in your community. So this was a document that was prepared with the Atlantic region and the province, and Kathleen Perewick of Municipalities NL was part of the development. So we're just going to shift to Kathleen here for a couple of slides to go through this, and then we'll keep going. So Kathleen, just tell me when you want me to go forward.
Okay, thanks so much, Ashley. And yes, this document now is a 10-year-old one, but definitely every bit as relevant as when it was designed. The RAC was a program funded by NRCan and the province. In fact, all the Atlantic region provinces were in on the bunch of projects that this was a part of. And this was basically the made right here contribution to the RAC in the period of 2009 through 2012 by the province of Newfoundland and Labrador. And it was something that was undertaken in partnership with MNL. And a number of folks would recognize Dr. Kelly Bodden's name. Kelly has had a long association with MNL and doing a variety of projects that relate to municipal sector services and issues. And this was something that she did with a bunch of grad students, including yours truly, back in the day. So it was intended as an accessible and entry-level guidance to help municipalities launch their adaptation planning. So while a decade on, definitely there are some things in this that could be updated. Certainly the resources section, because it's a very different landscape out there right now in terms of who's active here. And you'll note we've provided the links there for it. There's the original version of the guide out there on the ACASA site, but there's also a fillable version of it that MNL produced some years ago. So keep that one in mind if you're going to be working in a team and want a nice polished report to be able to produce as a deliverable. Next slide, please. next. Oh, they're great. So basically, this document does what all of those other tools provide. It gives you the core vulnerability assessment process. And the vulnerability assessment is basically a systematic process that's going to document your climate-related issues, ones that either already made themselves known to you, or things that available data and projections are telling us that are coming. So it's meant to help you begin the collective thought process about how and to what extent these issues are going to affect your community, and gives you an opportunity to work your way through the ways that they may be addressed. So the intent was that this one was going to be a self-guided process, something that particularly smaller communities without a lot of resources would be able to undertake in-house. But of course, having a facilitator is always an advantage when you're doing a process like this. And this kind of facilitation has been done by a number of our partners over the years. Of course, it was piloted, by the researchers themselves. We've had NGOs like the Conservation Corps that have been involved in delivering it. And we've even had staff more recently from AIMNet, who a number of you will recognize as a provider of municipal asset management training and services. They've also relied on it as part of their risk assessment processes to facilitate those kinds of conversations. Next slide. So in the toolkit, the same 7 steps are employed across a variety of scenarios. So there are 6 categories of community impacts that you can see to the left of this particular slide that are outlined. Many of you may experience more than one of those. In each case, there's a chapter that is set aside in the workbook. This is a workbook format document. So you can work your way through, as many or as few of the chapters as apply to your community. And together they'll basically get you through the scoping out stage of local adaptation plan development and priority setting. Next slide. So of course, today we're very much focused on the vulnerability assessment. So you're going to see that it's a process that asks a series of questions. And this is the tool in this particular toolkit that was employed. They're basically a series of prompts that lead you through the thought process around the types of vulnerabilities that, some that are more apparent than others. And this is one of the ways that you can sort of make sure that you don't leave things out. So, what infrastructure will be affected, who those impacts affect, because of course, just like during COVID, we may be all in the same storm, but we're often in different boats. And these theme checklists also include and speak to themes like, the local economy. How will that be affected environmentally? Are there other impacts that are going to be visited on us? So I will hand it back now to Ashley.
Thank you very much, Kathleen. So to Kathleen's point, the resources section, because it was made a decade ago, while a lot of those resources, are still quite valuable, there is additional data that's available, data, information, case studies, there's lots of things. So if you were here yesterday, you'll recall that Joel Finnis from Memorial University spoke about climatedata.ca and climateatlas.ca. Both of those are partnerships with the federal government to share data. There's also several other locations. So the link for the province there will take you to updated IDF curves. You can get the Newfoundland and Labrador 2018 climate projections. The summary document is there. If you scroll down about halfway through that page, you can get to it. The detailed data, I'm not sure where it sits anymore. It used to be at Turn Back the Tide, but as Joel mentioned, those links are broken. It is available, you just have to ask for it. So if that's something that you're very interested in, please feel free to reach out to Emma or I, and we can make sure that you get access to it. There's a few other places where we can go for case study examples. Climate Atlantic is developing resources, so their website has some funding opportunities listed there in terms of programs, and also they're putting together a network map to create a community of practice for those who are involved in addressing climate change adaptation. Sapir, have I missed anything in terms of what's available on your website?
No, that's pretty much it. Yes, Networking Map, which is a newly launched tool that its purpose is to connect everyone's space, and I highly encourage everyone to fill their information on behalf of themselves or their organizations there. It would be very beneficial. And there are going to be new tools which are going to be, I would say, released soon. So as of now, I think Networking Map is the most recent one. Yeah, thanks, Ashley.
Excellent, thank you. The legal document that Tina Northrup shared with us yesterday is also an initiative of Climate Atlantic, and when the final version is ready, I'm sure you'll find it on their website there, which will be, I think, very helpful to understand the extent to which, sort of where approximate boundaries of liability are, which one always needs to be concerned about as a municipality or a business owner. The climate central sea level map, so this one here that says surging seas, both Climate Atlantis, the Climate Atlas and the climatedata.ca do actually have some information about that, but as consultants, we have found that this particular tool is just the most user-friendly in terms of accessing and understanding of where annual flooding will happen or what will happen as it relates to sea level rise. There's a lot of options with this one. You can run scenario-based modeling. So when Joel was talking, for example, about the RCPs, we take a lot of action versus we are unable to take much action for whatever reason, for better or for worse. This gives you the option to sort of see your best and worst case scenario, which is helpful when you're going through a risk tolerance exercise to understand how to make a decision in a space with a high level of uncertainty. The one here, the changingclimate.ca, the map of adaptation actions, and this link specifically through FCM and their Green Municipal Fund. Both of these are libraries of case studies of other organizations and jurisdictions undertaking climate adaptation projects. There is a boatload of case studies and research available with that. And so it takes some time to go through, but there is quite a lot of resources available. So this slide will be provided as part of our package, so you don't have to try and, screenshot or write everything down. So with that, this is where we start to get into what we are going to do today. So in Joel's presentation, he gave sort of like a sneak peek of our community. We were trying to come up with a name, but nothing, although some were funny, nothing seemed super appropriate. Ultimately, what this is the culmination of 3 or 4 years work at Fundamental, collaborating with communities to try and support the addressing of climate vulnerabilities that the towns are experiencing. Sometimes it's a clear path, sometimes it's not a clear path. And so what we've done is try and take all of the most common things that we hear and see as part of our project work and kind of just smash them into this fictitious place. And so you'll see when you go into the Miro boards that there's zones, and that's so that we could have a structured discussion when moving through the breakout groups, which is coming up here in just a few minutes. And then to support the understanding of how we make decisions with the climate data that's available and in spaces of uncertainty. We took from climatedata.ca some projections of a community in Newfoundland that will remain undisclosed, just so that we had real data for a location that we can use to layer onto this for the decision making. And then sort of to like prime the, I don't know, pump of your brain. It's a bad analogy, Ashley, but just sort of to get you in a space where you're thinking about lots of things. Vulnerabilities can often, because we talk a lot about sea level rise and storm surge and coastal issues, and we talk a lot about stormwater, which often leads you to like hard or gray engineering solutions, or like an infrastructure focus, which is not unimportant, but also it is important to sort of look at how broad the categories or the areas of vulnerabilities are. So I mean, sea level rise and storm surge, coastal flooding, inundation, those are key issues, along with existing developments in floodplains, overland stormwater management that exacerbates erosion at along the coast, cliff erosion, taking a watershed lens, addressing groundwater supply. All of those things are very important. But then we also have to look at things like wildfire, how some of the issues that we're facing are actually regional. They don't stop with municipal boundaries. What we do when we start to do greenfield development on steep slopes, how that affects land use planning and zoning, how all of these things kind of integrate with emergency planning and public health risks associated with the changing climate, maintaining potable water and sanitary sewer provision and a level of service that maintains public safety, bridge infrastructure, again, a watershed lens. I thought I took out all the duplicates. Clearly I didn't. And so those are all sort of organizational planning and understanding things. And then it's also important to consider like older and inefficient dwellings and how that connects to energy poverty and vulnerable populations. Also looking at the impact on cultural heritage, mental health and climate grief, and how a changing climate impacts food security. And then tied into some of the questions that we had yesterday about insurance. So looking at insurance and stability of property values, the impact on local industry and economy. All of these things are sort of areas of vulnerability that may or may not be within the purview of, direct control or influence of a municipal government. But things that are climate change adaptation vulnerabilities nonetheless. And so with that, let's get to it. So as I understand right now, you will be directed into breakout groups. And then once in the breakout group, your facilitator will share a Miro board link in that chat after some short introductions of each of the group members. And then we'll start to dive in. You're on mute, Joe. I can't hear you.
I got cut off. I was in the middle of this total spiel here. I'm just talking it up. And
We gave you 2-minute warning, but I started talking again too and got cut off. So.
All very good. All right.
I'd just like to say that Kathleen timed it perfectly and did not get cut off at all.
But Kathleen, you can't compare to Kathleen.
I paid my team well.
Cool. Well, I think that was pretty good. No major technical issues that I know of. And I guess we'll just go around by room number. Probably makes most sense. And I was one. So I suppose I will start. So we had mostly engineers plus town of Balleen. So that was just to give you our background set of circumstances. One thing, so what I should say first, we're gonna go around and each of the facilitators or a volunteer, if there was one, will just say something quick about what went on in their room, something notable, questions that came up, anything at all. So in our group, a lot of questions came up about information that was not provided about this place. Of course, we didn't flesh out all of the details that we possibly could have of this place, but it just highlighted the fact that you really do need that localized information and as much data as you can have. So for example, in zone 2, we're looking at this cliff and we don't know what type of cliff that is, geologically speaking. So to rank the probability of that erosion was difficult because we didn't quite know how rocky that was, how sandy that was, etc. And in another case, what was another example of that? I'm sure other people thought of it too. And in general, kind of stepping back and looking at it all again, it was pretty clear that everything was developed thinking about that area alone. And it wasn't very, there wasn't a comprehensive development plan in the beginning. And it was the localized thinking that, might have made sense back then, is now manifesting in these interconnected issues that are, more difficult and more complex to deal with. Is that a good amount of time for a report back, we think? Okay, let's go to room 2.
Okay, well, we had a nice mix of folks. It was all sort of urban region peeps for the most part, except we had one outlier from Nova Scotia. But we all imagined ourselves in the space. And a good bit of back and forth around a number of the emergency implications, and the vulnerabilities vis-a-vis being able to access parts of the community. A lot of back and forth too around, what is major versus what is catastrophic. How do we make that final determination? And the engineers in the room were definitely sort of thinking in terms of some of the deeper dives that might follow on some of these high level areas of identification. And then there was the other piece, the being in the same storm and different boats. So maybe I'll get one of either Beth or Danielle perhaps to just say a thing or two about that, because that was really where our conversation left off.
I'm happy to say something about that. We were talking about both in terms of when we're talking about the risk to coastal homes or flooding in general, and also about the impacts of these things on people in the community, depending on their identity as in terms of economic status, in terms of how diversity generally, how they get around the community, whether they're insured or not, all kinds of things, and also that that they may or may not feel comfortable coming speaking with their political representatives or reaching out to the city or participating in this kind of feasibility study, so that the information that we get from citizens may not be representative of what's happening in the community unless we explicitly reach out to people who are less likely to participate.
Nice. Any other key points that any of my crew want to jump in on? I guess we'll leave it there then.
Okay, as room 3, actually, it was fantastic. We had great rounds of discussions, and it was a very constructive conversations around each zones, and we didn't take a break. I mean, we were so much engaged with the discussions that we didn't know, okay, oh my gosh, it's just 2 minutes left. And we had a great team because from different disciplines, municipalities, NGOs, academics, provincial government, they were all in that team, which provided, a kind of a multi-lens insights while we're looking at these issues. And I think the best takeaway of this breakout room was that when we want to conduct a vulnerability assessment, we need to take a multi-lens approach. So while we're looking at the watershed, we want to conduct a kind of vulnerability assessment for infrastructures, or the new concepts around eco-anxiety or cultural grief was discussed during this breakout room, which was a great point. And yeah, we were very good at hazard identifications. And after that, I mean, based on our hypothetical communities and their budgeting, limited budgeting resources, we try to prioritize the risks on our risk map. And I think we all agree which are judgments based on the location of the hazards on the risk map. And yeah, very much, I mean, it was a very useful dialogue that we had, and that's pretty much of it. I mean, I'm not sure if anyone else from our team want to include any other missing points. And I really enjoyed these rounds of conversation. Yep.
All right, well, I guess I will talk. So our group breakout room 4, we had a number of over half engineers, including myself, and then a few folks in towns, and a lot of the same themes came out. But just to highlight some of the bigger ones, so we focus kind of on the qualitative aspects of the vulnerability assessment. And then there was questions, 2 big ones I thought that came out. One was, how do we actually quantify the risk and what's the distinction between being a major catastrophic, and different folks are going to maybe perhaps see that a little bit differently. But also related to that was risk. Of course, the level of vulnerability is going to determine the risks. So say like a community that doesn't have as much resources or as older infrastructure, it's going to be more vulnerable than one that has more resources. Even if some of the impacts or failures could be the same, the risk could be higher, and the vulnerabilities could be different. And then I think the other one is also the how to deal with cascading effects. So if you have a failure like a bridge, what's the risk of that bridge failing versus what's the risk of that failure causing further failures downstream, and where do you quantify that, and how do you quantify it? And I think we're really talking about the iterative nature of this, and getting lots of voices involved, and especially local knowledge and things like that. So that's what I got from it. If anybody else in the group has anything to add or please go ahead.
Okay, I guess I'll jump in then with our zone, group 5. We were also a great mix of people, and I think like some of the things you talked about also came up with our group. For example, needing kind of like the local knowledge to make an actual like risk assessment that is concerning the issues and how well things are built for that community. And then other, reoccurring themes that we kind of saw in all of the zones was like water supply and potability, and then power also was a reoccurring theme that came along. And then also I found like a very interesting topic that we came up with was the potential for new jobs with implementing these resilient methodologies in these communities, which is something more like not seen as like negative as the rest of the conversation, I would say. And we also did find a few connections talking about those like cascading effects that Joe was just talking about between zones 3 and 4. So of course, if you do have a fire in one zone, but then the bridge is going down, the fire hall can't access that, it's really at the end very interconnected. And also, you know, you have that freeing up of land in, I think it was the last zone, zone 4, and then that is causing effects on the water. And then again, the bridge in zone 3. So at the end of the day, you kind of have to take problems also with a larger lens that's an interconnected, I would say, community between all the zones. So yeah, that was from our group. And thank you for everybody for participating.
Excellent, thank you. So we were zone 6, and we also had a great group of people. It was quite a mix, and we had some interprovincial representation, folks from Nova Scotia and PEI, as well as Newfoundland and Labrador. One of the things that was highlighted, and this has been echoed in the other groups, is like how critical data and information really is in order to figure out how to make the decision, and the lack of information and like the uncertainty with the data is actually a vulnerability in and of itself. And so that highlights how important it is when you're making like risk tolerance type decisions, that there's not really a right or wrong answer precisely. It's not in the same way as like, you know, you can add 2 and 2 and get a number and put a check mark beside it, right? Like it really does have to do with involving your stakeholders and identifying how conservative or not conservative you are willing to be on a certain issue. We also talked a little bit about how sometimes with the cascading effects and how sort of looking towards next steps, if you're trying to apply for funding, which is always critical, that like you can have this overarching area of vulnerability in these individual initiatives, and that's really helpful in terms of sustaining traction and momentum on the long term, so that you can identify each of the initiatives as phases, and you build on that, and you build resiliency by taking it those few steps at a time. We looked at, in zone 1, we looked a lot at access with the causeway and the breakwater, that those were sort of the 2 key areas of vulnerabilities that we felt like sort of all other things were kind of like sub-cascaded issues of those. And for zone 4, we were looking at fire, and the impacts of development on sort of watershed and regional views of that. So if anyone in my group, group 6 rather, it's not possessive, anyone in group 6 wants to say anything that I missed, please absolutely raise your hand here. Okay, I think we're good. Emma?
Yeah,
So close us out.
Sure. So I mentioned in my group, I'm not sure if everyone did, but the groups will stay more or less the same for tomorrow and the next day, depending on who signed up for which days. And we do plan to rotate our facilitators. So you'll get a chance to chat with somebody else just for fun and to make more connections. Other than that, I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you found it engaging. Please let us know any thoughts you have. We will make a survey at some point to get your thoughts on the whole format. And everything you've put in your breakout room board, you'll go to the same board again tomorrow, unless you get switched around for any other reasons, just numbers or whatever. But you'll get to see what everyone else did, because I'll save them all at the end and send them out. So hopefully that'll be interesting later to see other people's thoughts. That is all from me. I didn't get many issues with the link today, so I hope that's a good sign and that everyone who wanted to join was able to. Same thing tomorrow, we'll send out the reminder, and it's a unique link for yourself, I have learned. So that's all. You're free to go, and thanks again for showing up. We hope to see you tomorrow.
Thanks again, everyone, for participating.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thanks.